It's called a capote. See, hundreds of years ago, the Indians only wore what? Deer skin, right? And hides and beaver pelts. That's what they had for their clothing. But then, when the English and the British, am I talking over their head?
Oh, you're fine.
Came here, they started trading. And they got all kinds of good things from Europe. They could get material, cloth, calico. They could get pewter buttons from Europe. They could get silver, pieces of silver. Now see, this piece of silver has a fruit-de-lait on it. That means it's from France. This piece of silver has got a beaver on it. And that's, see, the beavers are here plentiful along the rivers, along the Kankakee River. And they liked it, the Europeans came and traded for the beaver pelts. So they would give all these trade items to the Indians. And this cross looks like a Celtic, isn't it, Scott? Don't that look Celtic? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had the Irish, and the British, and the Scotchman, and all of them was here. Okay? And so they liked beads and trinkets, and they got turquoise. Where do you think turquoise comes from? It comes from out west, like in New Mexico and Arizona. So, I brought you a map today about what we looked like in 1830 in this area. You want to pass these around, Scott? We'll get a few at each table. You want to do it? I'll wait till you get this stuff. So you can take this map home, and it shows you, there's a code up here at the top. First of all, you see the key map? See the key map down here? That shows the general location of where we're at. So it's down in our area. And so then up here on the right, you can see the little triangle? That says an Indian village. How's your, can you read, Scott, better than Auntie?
I can.
Okay. The Indian village would be our legend up there. Here we go. I see it better here.
So the triangle's an Indian village.
Right.
The circle around it is an Indian village on a reservoir.
Reservation. Yeah, okay. Then the triangle is a reservation. Those are more north up north. But you can take this home and read this map and see where all the different Indian tribes lived. Whether it was the Potawatomi or the Miamis or the Cayugas or the Kickapoos, okay? So that's for you to take home and look at. So, you know, the Indians or Native Americans lived here about 10,000 years in this area right here. Can anybody tell me why they couldn't live there before 10,000 years ago? Does anybody know what was here like 10,000 years ago? What covered all of our land? Have you studied about that yet?
Grass.
Nope, not grass. We still got grass. What about the Ice Age? Have you studied about the Ice Age yet? Huh?
I learned about it at my house, but...
You learned about it? Okay. So 10,000 years ago, we were covered with ice, with the glacier. Remember when the glacier comes down from Arctic, right? Arctic, North? Well, that did that about 3 times. It would come down here and cover our land. Then it would start melting and retreat and go back. It did that 2 or 3 times, so nobody could live there, okay? But what happened when the last glacier came and melted, it didn't go all the way through Indiana, but it was here, it was a mile high. Can you imagine that? Ice a mile high right here. And it would grind back and forth and back and forth, and it ground up all of these little animals and fishes and everything, and that's why we have such rich agriculture ground here today. And the last glacier, it pushed all the dirt down to past Indianapolis and left it down there in the hills. So when you go down to Brown County and down in that area, we've got hilly areas and we got the flat ground. Isn't that interesting? So what the glacier also did is it carved out our Lake Michigan and all of the little rivers and streams down here. So when the Europeans came, they came basically from Canada. The French came down. They were coming down to explore the new land. This almost was like New France. So they would come down Lake Michigan in their canoes. Then they would go on the St. Joe River, and then they'd walk 16 miles and get on the headwaters of the Kankakee. You all know where the Kankakee River is, right? What other rivers do we have? The Iroquois, the Kankakee, the Tippecanoe, the Yellow. It's all around in this area, right? Okay. So, anyway, there's 4 traditions in the Indians and Native Americans. Okay, same thing. The oldest, up to 10,000 years old, is Paleo. Have you ever heard of Paleo Indians? That's Paleo Indians, okay? Then the next is the Archaic Indians. Then we have the Woodland and the Mississippian. Those are 4 traditions. Out of the 4th tradition, the Mississippian, came the wandering tribes that were here when the Europeans came, like your Potawatomis, your Miamis, your Kickapoos, and all of those. And that's when the contact came from the Europeans coming here, and that's when the trade started and so forth, okay? So this was a great place to live for the Indians, because they had your rivers and your lakes and your streams, and they had all they needed. They had the beaver pelts and the deer hides and rabbits and buffalo and elk. There was even elk here in Buffalo. Did you know that? Huh? Years ago, probably in the 1600s, we still had buffalo and elk here. I helped work at an archaeology site up here along the river by the Palms Bridge, and we were down 6 feet in the ground. We found elk horns from a long, long time ago. So we knew they were here by the evidence, okay? And so then, what kind of food do you think they ate? Anybody got any
You
ideas?
guys just did research projects on the Miami and the Kickapoo
Did they?
last week.
Really?
I didn't know what they ate.
What did they eat?
Corn and bugno.
Oops, you first.
Buffalo vegetables that they grew.
Right. What kind, remember? Back here, you, Liz. Yeah, you. Uh-huh. Louder? Huh?
They ate meat from the animals that they see.
Right, you're right. The deer, and you?
They ate like rabbits, deer.
Buffalo, elk. What kind of veggies did they have, though? Oh, here we are. Yeah, corn, yeah, right. And you? She said you were gonna say, huh? Okay, so they ate corn, where am I at? And, I lost my place here, just like going. Pumpkins, squash, and huckleberries. They were wild, we call them blueberries today because they're bigger now, but in the wild, I remember when we were kids, we used to pick huckleberries, did you? Down there, and dewberries, and there was wild strawberries, and they did a lot with nuts too. They gathered the hazelnuts. The women would go out with their baskets in the fall and gather all the nuts and dry them. Hickory nuts and walnuts, and they did a lot with the cattails. You know what cattails are? They grow in the creeks along there. Well, they would pull them up when they were young in the spring and clean them and eat the roots. Tastes really good. And then they would also pull them up later in the year and dry them, and they ground them, and that's what they used for flour. So see, they had everything they needed here, all their food that they wanted. So, and they did not live in teepees around here. And the men did not have, they wore turbans on their head. They didn't have headdresses like you do. That was out west where the other Indians were. So I brought you some pictures here of a wigwam.
Just take one and pass it down.
You want to take one and pass it down? Okay.
Yeah, we built a wigwam out in the courtyard.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we just had the frame, we didn't put the covering on it.
Oh, good.
But they know what it looks like.
So they didn't live in teepees around here. They lived in wigwams, or some of them are called wickawas. And the way they made those is they cut the cattails and they laid them down flat like a mat, and they wove between them. See, like that third picture on there? Okay, and then they made like a mat rug out of that, and then they would cover their wickawas with that. Okay, and it was pretty warm. Does anybody go down to the Battle of the Mississinewa? Did any of you go there? Because they have a lot of the reenactments down there. Did you ever go, Scott?
I haven't been to that one, but at Buckley Homestead, they have their Indian village there.
Oh, do they?
And I've been to the one down at Tippecanoe, the Feast.
Oh, yeah.
And they do a small one over at Kankakee Marsh. Right. They do that in the spring.
Right. But that one's wonderful down there. They come from all over the world, the French and the English and
I miss
everything.
you
They
up.
bring their horses, and they're in full costume, wool costumes. And they do the reenactment. And my friend Cindy Deerdorf, she goes down there and does all the food supplies. So you can see, and then some of them lived in long houses. So a whole family, many generations could live in that. Or sometimes that was just for their tribal meetings and so forth. Okay? Okay, I'm going to teach you 2 new words today. Maybe you know them already. Anthropology. Can you say that?
Anthropology.
What does it mean? Do you know? You don't know? Okay. Anthropology is the study of different cultures. Like the Indians were a culture, the English one were a different culture, the black people that come here, they're a different culture. So anthropology is the study of all the different Indian tribes and white people, the English and so forth. Then the other one is archaeology. I bet you can say that right. Archaeology. And what's that study about? Anybody know? Archaeology is a study of garbage. The garbage that these prehistoric people left behind. And that's how we can go out and date and study these sites. That's why it's so important if we find Indian things around here. I've worked with the state archaeologists for since 1978. And we find a new site, like they're building a highway or something and going to destroy an Indian site. Then we have to go out there and take care of it. But we have about 200 sites just on my farm at Tassinau. So I live at Tassinau, and this was a French mission and trading post in 1673. And when I had 3 little boys, and so we used to walk out in the cornfield, and we'd find these buttons and these coins, and we'd find arrowheads. So these were all things that were, see, the French came first from Canada, and they were going to take this land over for France. And then the British came, and of course they had a big battle. So the French flag was at Tassinau, and then the British came and burned out all of the forts and missions around here, and the British took over. And then in 1838, the pioneers come, and Tassinau was settled as a pioneer village in 1838. So we have things from the pioneers in our field. This is our garbage, our archaeology research, and we have Indians, we have trade pipes, and all kind of beads. So I'll have you stand up here in a circle and I can explain. Well, first I'll explain this one. This is a nutting stone, see? Did you ever go out and look in a sand hill and find some rocks like this? Do you have a question?
No.
Okay. See this rock? You can put a walnut on there. In archaeology class, we studied if you do 50 walnuts on here, it makes a dent. So you can practice that and find out, see? So this is what they crack their stones on. Okay, and then here's how they made their tools. This is a celt. It was a multi-purpose tool. They could use it to make their pottery. They could help skin an animal. So here's one that they've pecked it all out. See how rough it is? They've taken another stone and pecked that all out for the shape of it. But they didn't get it all finished, because when it's finished, it's nice and smooth like this. See how they've polished that? They probably used rawhide or deer hide from it, maybe the brains from the deer, whatever it took to sand that down, okay? And then here's some pieces of pottery we found, and we can pass this around so you can feel it. And then, okay, we'll start one here. See this one, how they decorated this pot? They just took a stick and put a decoration and dug it in there. This is probably about 800 years old. So you want to pass it around and you can feel it. We'll start one over here. And you can see the tempering inside. See, they would take clay, they'd dig clay out of the creek beds around here, and then they would take broken stones, like maybe some of these broke, and they would grind them up and mix that with the clay, and that would be their tempering inside to hold the glue together when they cooked it in the fires. So that's Indian pottery. Pass it around, okay? Now, we talked about the Indians being up to 9,000 to 10,000 years old around here, and the first Indians were what? Remember the oldest Indians? Paleo. Paleo is the oldest, okay? So most of these things in here are paleo. And these were from our farm at Tassinau. So if you'd like to come up here, Mr. Sharp.
Okay, let's take, Daniel, let's take your row. Yeah, that group, go around the table first and take a look, and then we'll all get a turn.
So these are all things. See, the Europeans coming over here, the the Indians taught them how to smoke. Bad thing, right? That smoke. So they went back and they made these trade pipes, and then they would bring them back here and they'd trade for the beaver pelts. And these are all the pieces of trade pipes that we found out in the field, and they date from what 1610 to about 1910. So they're pretty old. Okay, here's our paleo projects here. And this is made out of a deer antler, see? That was an awl. They could use it to make pottery or to weave with. Okay, and all of these, aren't they beautiful? So those Indians were pretty smart, weren't they? They had a lot of talent, didn't they?
I have one of these at my house.
Do you?
I have one.
Yeah.
Mine's short.
Yeah, it does. That's a knife. See, they would put that into a piece of stick and bind it with some, what do you call it? Rawhide, yeah. And then they, see, that'd be like a skinning knife. So they would skin them like that. Did you ever see a skinning knife? Okay. So these are some of our oldest. Then over here we have, these were from the pioneer era. There'd be houses that burnt down, and their little dolls, their bodies are made out of leather. And this was all that was left over for toys. Now these are the trade beads. They were made in Europe and Italy. And the Europeans would come over here and trade for what? Beaver pelts. Remember the beaver pelts? And these are coins and buttons that we call them. There's a French military button there. Indiana militia. And these were buttons that they probably in the 1800s that they made some dresses, make some summer dresses. Okay? Yeah, that's a little lot. That's okay, that's lot. 1853. The bodies, no, that's the bodies would burn up, but they got the little dolls would be out of leather, but they'd wear out, so all the stuff was the first.
Yeah, it's been a long time ago. All right, guys, have a seat. Let's let a different group go back. Okay, back row.
Here's one piece of pottery, just got the other one.
The other one's still, Jasmine,
it's
you've
going.
got that other piece of pottery.
You still pass on?
Yep.
Okay, here we are. You're next, okay. Okay, here we are. These are the pipes that they made. The Europeans came and the Indians taught them how to smoke. So they would go back and make these clay pipes. See, these are all broken. And they'd bring it back here and trade them for what? What did they trade for? Beaver pelts. Right, that's right. Okay? Yeah, beaver pelts, that means the skin. Okay. And these are, excuse me? Do you have some of those?
The cat tails.
Yeah. There's a lot of them. So these are the paleo, these go back to the oldest, they're about 9,000 and 10,000 years old.
These are the cat tails that laid down flat.
And this was made out of
Stick, and then they use them to screw it.
And
Maybe
here's our
next year when I
things,
build one,
these are like military buttons,
bring up some cat tails.
Goodyear buttons. And these were the trade beads that they get. They made it in Europe and they brought it over here.
It's getting a little loud in here, folks.
Yeah.
They were quiet for you.
Yeah. A little teacup, yeah, it's a child's little tea set, yeah. It's in it to the body. See, the bodies were made out of leather, and they wore out, and they cut them out, fire or something. So all was left is those are this whole thing was like laying out in the field. That's what we're gonna do. Yeah. It's a lot of it.
You guys seen this one?
What? The other one was just a little coin that we found. This piece of crystal. Yeah, a lot. There's a lot, and there's a lot there. You're in the crystals, are you? Let's do it around.
All right, group. Let's switch.
Here we go. Yeah. Here's a locket. Here's a locket. Here's some of our trade beads that the Europeans would make in Italy. They made out of glass, and they got over here and they traded for what? What did they trade for? Beaver pelts. Yeah. That was left over and we found in the field. And so the the bodies wore out. They were probably made out of leather. Didn't last too long. Or they went through a house fire. And these are the pipes and pipe stems they found from the Europeans. They made the pipes back here. The Indians taught them how to smoke. Bad Indians, right? And then they made these and they traded those for the beaver pelts. And here's our tray that's the oldest. It goes back to paleo. Yeah, now see this one. Yeah, arrowheads. And this is a paleo knife. See, it's just a blade. A knife blade. This is a knife. Yeah, they're pretty sharp.
This is metal.
That's made out of a deer antler. An antler. This one got broke. These are about 8,000 years old. This would be about 10,000 years old.
I have one that's like, it's like
Uh-huh.
and it does look like a
Yeah.
it's like that.
Wow. Pretty nice, huh?
What?
What? You found one? You did? You walk out in the tree. You threw one at a tree?
Yeah.
You better go find it. Scott, I always call this my bird smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody looked at that. It's metal, so it's what comes out of the sky that burns.
Meteorite?
Meteorite, yeah. So somebody came by, a geologist, and he looked at it and he said that's a meteorite.
Wow.
Coins and buttons. Those are from the French and the British and the pioneers. Now that's a locket that a lady would hang around her neck. Okay, any questions?
Yes. How did they make that's a lot.
Well, the Europeans made them. They made them in molds. They made those back in Europe. And see, look at, they got holes in them because they're all broken. And they still make them today. But when they get hot, then they drop them, and that's how they break. But it's hard to find a bowl to hold one when they've been out in the field where the tractors run over them. But see, there's names on here like Montreal, and Ireland, and France. And all these types of that they make. Did you? Oh, and you lost it. Okay, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, why don't you guys go back to your seats and then we'll all, we've got a few minutes, everybody can ask a question. Just make sure it's a question and not a story, please.
It's got your-
Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Gavin? What kind of buttons are those?
That's a good question. Some of them are like rubber, and Mr. Goodyear made buttons before he made tires. Did you know that? So some of these are rubber, and it says on the back, like 1853 Goodyear. And some of them are made out of
You
like
can pick that up, move around with it, and make the
semi-precious
movie if you want.
stones. And some of them are
Grab it.
made out of mussel shells,
Just pick it up. Yep.
like the ones on my blouse here, I think. Those are made out of mussel shells that they found in the tree pits. So that was a good question. Back here,
How old were you when you knew about all this stuff?
how old was I? Oh, probably about 40 years ago. I was probably about 30, and I've done this for a long time. Any more questions?
Cheyenne, you have a question?
What would they use before they could find any rocks for their tools to make stuff?
There's always been rocks here, because like the glacier brought it down. There wasn't a lot of flint. Flint or dirt is what they used to make that. And in our area, we didn't have a lot of good of that. But when the glacier came and pushed everything down here, then they would have pieces from Canada that were good. And then the other thing is they traded for a lot of the good rock, the dirt and the things that they made the arrowheads out of with the other Indian tribes. Yes. It was a lot of work, but they were pretty good at it. They took one rock and hit it against another, made it. And like this all here, they helped to chip the edges out so it was nice and short. So if you're ever up, oh, we got more questions here, huh?
So what field did you guys find this stuff?
This would be a Tassadong where I live. And I'll tell you how to get there. If you're in Couts, do you know where Couts is?
Yeah.
Okay. go north, and then you go over to Boundsbridge Road, and right where Boundsbridge Road comes out on Route 49, there's a house there. And in front of that house, there's a marker, a historic marker, and it says Tassenau, 1867, French Mission and Trading Post. So you can see the mark there, okay? You, what,
How old do you think those blocks are?
those locks? They're probably from late 1700s to about 1850. That's it?
Nick, you have a question, Nick?
Where did they get the leather from?
The leather?
Like the leather doll?
The leather what?
That leather over there? The doll. Yeah.
Which one? Oh, the doll? Oh, well, this leather from the dolls, that would be from the pioneer people. They were doing that. But where did the Indians get their leather? Where did, you tell me, where did the Indians get their leather? Come on. Huh?
Right here.
Well, before the
No,
pioneers.
before the pioneers. Come on, we talked about it. They had all the food they got, and where'd they get the food from? The meat. Deer, remember?
Yep.
The deer hides and the beaver pelts and the buffalo,
And elk.
okay? And elk, yeah, don't forget the elk.
Because when you kill an animal and you take the skin, you can either preserve it in one of two ways. You can take it and make it just into leather, like make shoes or belts or something. Or you can preserve it with the fur on it to keep you warm.
Yes. The walnuts,
Walnuts.
the food, they went and gathered. The Indian ladies would have big baskets that they made out of reeds, and they would go out when the walnuts are falling right now this time of year, they fall over the ground. And they gather them all and take them back and store them in their wigwams, right? They're in their longhouse. Well, if that's all, you've been, well, one more.
Okay, Shane, one more.
How do they pound the nuts when they find the rock? Like how they?
They use another rock. They put that walnut on there and then they take another rock and beat on it. Then pick out all the goodies. Right? Well, you've been a wonderful class. I have never seen such a class that was so well behaved and respectful. And I appreciate you.
All right, pat yourself on the back.
All right.
And you have to thank your teacher too, right?
All right, well, thanks,
Mr.
guys.
Shahar.
All right, if you guys would like to, we'll go take our restroom break. We can show Mrs. Anderson our wiki up in the courtyard while we're down there. Just push the
Oh,
red,
you're with, yeah?
yep, push the red button on that, Jasmine.
Really?